What's up, Barnhill family, and welcome back to your home for all things combat sports.
Yo.
Guys, today's episode is brought to you by Fight Signal, but more on them later because right now we need to break down the UFC 314 main event. Alexander Volkanovski looking to become the champion once again, and the young, hungry Diego Lopes looking to surmount the mountain for the first time. Nick, this is a great fight.
Oh, yeah.
There's a lot to break down here, and there's very few fights where it's such a stark crossroads fight for a certain fighter, but
Right.
It is very much that for Alexander Volkanovski. Now, if Diego loses, he still has a bright future ahead of him.
For sure.
But for Volkanovski, it's either become the champion again, or people are going to be saying that you should retire. And we
Right.
very rarely have such a stark contrast in results depending on what happens. So let's first start, with breaking down what Diego Lopes needs to do to win. Then we'll get into Volk and then ultimately make the predictions. But just your initial thoughts on the fight.
Yeah, I really do like this fight, and I feel like this was the best thing they could have done when Ilya left the division. Volkanovski, if he loses this fight, though, is going to be in the no man's land for real. Like, what's he going to do at 45? Get back into the contender lineup or move back to 55 after he lost twice there? It doesn't really make that much sense. So, yes, I think it's good for you to shine light on this being such a crossroad fight. Another thing that sticks out to me before I tell you all the X's and O's that really stick out is this is also one of those fights that's so interesting because I feel like it's either going to be Volkanovski's easiest win in a title fight in his UFC career, or Diego Lopes is going to win, and it's going to be way easier than he ever thought getting a UFC belt would have ever been.
Yeah.
And that's just because of how the styles and the matchup is. So obviously everybody's saying this past, since the fight got announced basically, that Diego is going to come out strong. He's a big storm in the beginning, and he brings, chaos in the first round. Sometimes he has enough success to get the fights over with. If not, he usually does enough damage to accumulate enough and then get his hand raised, whether a decision or later on finds a finish. But I think that this fight between Volkanovski and Lopes is so interesting because Volkanovski has to prove to the world, and I think prove to himself, that he is still durable and he still has a chin. Because when it comes to fight IQ and skill for skill, battle, Diego Lopes is not the fighter that Volkanovski is. 5 years ago, Diego Lopes was on the regional scene, and Volkanovski was defending his UFC belt.
Yeah.
The same very belt that they are about to be fighting for. So Volkanovski's been there, done that, and I feel like he's one of those few champions that lost his belt, but still has the hunger to become champion again. And part of that's because he just has nowhere else to be but besides title fights. Diego hasn't been there. We've seen him get gassed in 3-round fights, and I really start to wonder if that explosive style really is a live by the sword, die by the sword situation for Diego, because he comes out with so much explosivity and volume, and he really does try to take his opponent's head off, and it's worked for him, but he's not fought people like Volkanovski and people with that high of a level. Now, if he goes out and does the same thing with Volkanovski and Volk's chin is deteriorated after those 2 knockouts that he's faced, then I think Diego will have his path to victory very clear-cut. Go out there, bring a storm, find the susceptibility in Volk's chin, and get him knocked down to the ground, and then probably find a submission. That's the likelihood for Diego to get his hand raised. But, there's other aspects that I think could play a role. Diego's very good with his counter striking, and while Volk's defense, when he enters on his offense, is very buttoned up, Diego still seems to find power shots when his opponent's moving forward. That's going to be something for Volk to watch out for. But Volk is very good with those angles, and one thing he does so well with the angles is he's constantly changing stances and fighting the outside foot. And when he switches back over into a mirrored stance, when you guys are both orthodox or both southpaw, then he usually takes a step back and waits for them to come towards him. So I'm really interested to see what direction Diego goes when he starts to see the stance switching out of Volkanovski, because Volk really does do that so well. And I would venture to say that the best thing you can do to somebody when they're switching stances as much as Volkanovski likes to is obviously you got to put your hands on them and close the distance with your feet, but this is MMA. We have to use our kicks as well. Volk's really good at catching kicks, so I would avoid that. But when he does square up, when he's switching stances, inevitably that's what's going to happen. Put a push kick or a teep kick right in the middle. That can start to zap the gas tank of Volk, which I think is exactly what Volk's going to want to do to Diego. So Diego needs to try to even that score a little bit by draining Volkanovski, because as this fight goes and as the rounds continue to progress, Volkanovski's chances are going to go up and up and up. If you go back and watch the fight between Diego Lopes and T. City Ortega, the first round was probably close to a 10-8. It was so good for Diego. But the volume in round 2 was next to none. He still looked all right, but he was not throwing nearly as much. So I really think he's got to work on conserving his energy. But at the same time, I don't know if being 2.5, 3 years in a UFC career, not having any 5-round fights is enough time for you to build that up. And it's just an experience thing. It's an IQ thing. And I think Diego is the right guy for the job. And if anybody that's an up-and-coming prospect has the ability to go in there and knock off a champion, it's Diego. But yeah, I'm not 100% certain.
Yes, so there's a lot of great nuggets you gave there,
Thank you.
I think the stance, throwing the push kick on the stance switch is something that would be really intelligent for Diego to do because, as you said, Volkanovski is really good at catching kicks.
Yes.
And he's really good at his takedowns off of the kick catch.
Right.
That's because of his Muay Thai background. One of the things that he trains a lot is catching a kick, baiting the kick first of all,
right,
then catching it and ultimately getting a takedown. And Volk is tremendous on the ground. As we saw, he even controlled Islam Makhachev on the ground for some time in their first fight. Two things that really stuck out to me when I was watching fights as well as reviewing Fight Signal for some little pieces of information that maybe aren't so easy to find when you're breaking down a fight.
Okay.
And one of the things they do that I really like is they put this chart up that shows almost like where the strengths are, and each fighter is in a different color, and you can it's almost like a graph. And the two things that really stuck out to me were Diego averages substantially more submissions, which we knew that, per 15 minutes at 2.4 submissions per 15 minutes. But the other one that really stuck out and I think is really important to dive into is he averages almost 3 times the knockdowns per fight that Volkanovski averages.
Wow.
So he's getting knockdowns at a 3x higher clip than Volkanovski. And what did we say is the big X factor in this fight? Did Volkanovski's chin get deteriorated because of his age and because of his legs and the amount of miles he's got under him? Or was it simply a factor of a short notice fight against a very dangerous Islam Makhachev,
right,
and then a short turnaround against probably the heaviest puncher the 145 division has ever seen in Ilia Topuria?
Right.
Was it just because of those two reasons, or are we seeing some chin deterioration? And I think that 3-time knockdown ratio, when you talk about the power puncher that Diego Lopes is, albeit he's not as clean as Ilia or Islam with his striking, but he does have a knack of finding the chin.
Oh, yeah.
So are we going to see a knockdown? Because those two statistics to me kind of coincide.
Yeah.
Because your thoughts on how Lopez might win, knockdown leading to a submission, those numbers would kind of indicate that. Is he going to get that knockdown and then hunt for the submission? Now, we know Volk is tremendous at getting out of submissions. We saw he was dead to rights, mounted guillotine with T-City.
Right.
And T-City is one of the best submission aces at 145.
Right.
So if he can get out of that, he can pretty much get out of anything. But can he get out of something like that if he's really rocked and really compromised and he's shaking the cobwebs off? So that, to me, is going to be the X factor. I think Diego needs to land the power early and get a knockdown early, because that's where he's going to put rounds in the bank. We know what Volk's going to do at the end of the fight. Volk is built for 5 rounds. He's got tremendous cardio. He's very disciplined. He's going to come to present a 5-round war to you. And the only thing is the only thing that will stop him from doing that is getting knocked out in the process or getting severely compromised in the process. So if he doesn't get knocked out, Diego needs to make sure he banks at least the first 2 rounds so that he can snag one of the final 3 and win this thing by decision.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Diego's very durable. So the issue is, I don't know if Volk's chin is still there. If it's still there, we're likely going to see a 5-round war, because Volkanovski's very, very good, but I do think that even if he feels a couple shots off Diego and it's like, okay, maybe my chin isn't gone, he's still not going to risk it. He's still going to be cautious. This is a title fight. He knows how to win, and I think he definitely wants to drag Diego into the deeper waters. But one thing that really sticks out to me about Volkanovski's sort of path down this title fight is he looked really good against Jair when he was able to take the fight to the ground. And he did it in about the first minute and a half of the fight. Yeah. So I think that the key for Volkanovski to slow down Diego Lopes, because we all can see the writing on the wall. First round is likely going to go to Diego Lopes, and it might be a finish in the first round. So I really think Volkanovski has to zap the energy in the first round. That first round, he can't concede. I think Diego brings too much of a storm. And like you said, he hits really hard. He has a knack for finding his targets. And one thing I love that he does is he doesn't just go insane when he has when he finally hurts somebody or he cracks you. Yes, he does get a little bit wild, but his shots are pretty calculated and on target. And while they may look like they're extra loaded up or something like that, he still does land them with accuracy. So what I really think that Volkanovski needs to look for is wait for that big moment to come, try to rope Diego into blitzing and then throwing one of those big attacks. Hopefully throws a kick in there that Volk can catch. But if he does that, I really think Volk needs to take the opportunity to get the fight to the ground. Don't worry about being afraid of him throwing submissions from the top. We saw Yair Rodriguez submit T-City Ortega from the bottom, and then we also saw what Volkanovski can do to a guy like Yair Rodriguez on the top. So, yeah, I don't know if Diego Lopes will be able to find the submission on Volk. He's so good. He catches the kick in the Yair fight, goes right to the ground, takes him straight to his corner, and he doesn't get up for the rest of the round. So I really do think that Volkanovski, if he does that in the first round, the chances of him going up skyrocket, and they don't only skyrocket for him to win a unanimous decision, but I think if he wins the first round, he will actually win by a finish, probably coming in round 4.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting because Diego Lopes being finished would be something to see.
Right.
And, you know, prior to the last 2 Volkanovski fights, you would say Volk being finished would be a sight to see.
Right.
But, you know, we saw what's happened, and Father Time is undefeated. So a couple things that really stand out to me for Volkanovski.
Okay.
He lands over 6 significant strikes per minute. So he's got a very high output.
Right.
And a lot of that has to do with his stance switching. A lot of that has to do with, you know, his volume and the way he creates angles and stuff like that.
Right.
And his combinations. The other thing is his defense. He absorbs very few significant strikes per minute. I think just over 3.
Right.
So he's doubling up on throughout his entire UFC career. He's doubling up on the strikes that he's landed versus the strikes that he's absorbed.
Right.
And his significant strike land per minute is higher by, I think, 2 per minute over Diego Lopes. Diego's hovering somewhere around 4.
Okay.
So Diego is going to have to, you know, make every shot count.
Yeah.
Just like Ilya. You know, Ilya did that. Ilya doesn't
Right.
have a crazy output either, but he's got to stay safe, and which is why I really like what you said about getting the takedown. I think if Volk can get the takedown, because Diego is going to be the most dangerous in the first 10 to 12 minutes of the fight.
For sure.
After that, I don't think the knockout, I mean, there's always a chance if you're in the UFC octagon, no matter who you're fighting, you can be in the women's strawweight division, you always have a chance of being knocked out.
Right.
Those chances vary, and they go down depending on where we are in the fight and who it is you're fighting.
Right.
And for Diego Lopes, I think that chance goes down tremendously after the 3rd round.
Yeah.
And so if Volkanovski can get a takedown in the first and get a takedown in the second and start to wear on a gas tank of somebody who hasn't shown us that he's a true cardio machine. You know, this isn't Max Holloway here that we're talking about. Diego Lopes he's got good cardio, but he's not at the top of the heap.
No.
So, you know, if you can get him down in the first round and do some damage and win the first round, get him down in the second round, you might start to see a desperate fighter come round 3.
Yeah.
But a desperate fighter who's a bit compromised, you know, cardiovascularly.
Right.
So that's where Volk can really shine. And that's where a lot of people don't remember some of the amazing finishes that Volk has had.
Oh, yeah.
But Volkanovski, if you come at him crazy, he's going to find your chin and he's going to put you down. And I think if Diego is compromised with his gas tank and he's getting desperate in the fight, that's where Volk will find his finish. So I don't disagree that, you know, if Volk can start to deteriorate the confidence of Diego, that he may find that finish, just because Diego will get a little bit desperate, and that's where the opening will come.
Yeah, you make some great points, but I will actually push back. I don't even think it's 10 to 12 minutes that he's dangerous. I think it's 5 to about 7 minutes where he's very dangerous. Volk really needs to be cautious in those moments, but also, like I said, you can't let up. You can't just play defense, because Diego will find those shots. And in MMA, you'll basically have your arms to block, right?
Yeah.
So something's always open. Diego will find some targets. But one thing I really do also want to push back on with this is I don't think Volk needs more than takedowns in the first round. I think if he does that, judging off of the past, Diego's volume drops so much in the second round, and then even less in the 3rd round, and then we don't really see him in title fights.
We don't know
yet.
what 4 and 5 looks like for Diego.
Right, right. So I think if Volkanovski goes out there and beats him, that's not only going to zap his gas tank after the first round, but it's also going to tell Diego, okay, I can't get this fight won on the ground. I'm going to need to do it on the feet. but he's going to be a little bit more tired. And one thing we know about Volkanovski, he's fast for the division and he's small for the division, height-wise. And while most of the time that is usually considered a disadvantage, Volk has fought guys, Max Holloway 3 times, he's built kind of like that. Ortega, Yair, everybody he's fought in the past few years has been a taller body guy, kind of similar to the body of Diego Lopes, and he's able to find his shots. He's able to get inside and evade from those big shots. I mean, think about Yair Rodriguez not being able to land any of those head kicks with any sort of, real true success is so impressive because he hits them on everybody. But one thing I noticed in Volk's fights, if you go back and study this, you'll pick up on how brilliant it is. But what he does is, after he's got you a little bit tired, he loves to bait you to get you to blitz on him. And the way he does that, and it didn't work for him against Ilia Topuria, but I do now realize what he was trying to set up, and I saw it work successfully in a couple other fights as I was preparing for this. He will throw that, he switches stances a lot, and if you're not switching stances, that's okay, because once he gets into the same stance as you, he will try to throw an inside leg kick. And that works because that usually gets the people blitzing. They think that you're going to be stuck in the water. But remember, Volk is a smaller body, and his defense is really good and disciplined. So once he throws that kick, they go, okay, I'll eat the inside leg kick because I'm going to hit him with something. But his defense is always poised and ready for that. And then he winds up scoring the better of the counter that he started the entire situation of. The entire offense started with a kick to the inside leg from him. They throw their flurry, but he's fully defense mode, ready to block it all. And then even though he's a shorter fighter, before they have the break and they separate, he's able to find his shots. So I really think that those sort of experienced veteran moves are going to help Volkanovski tremendously. A couple of nice sequences like that, and then we start to see Diego, zap his energy a little bit, start to maybe fight off the back foot, and then who knows, we could see Volkanovski flip the script, throw a beautiful 3-punch combination at his face, and then drop down for a beautiful double leg, just like he did in the Yair fight. Yeah. And then we've got a guy who I believe, skill-wise, fight IQ-wise, and experience-wise, is just leaps and bounds above Lopes. And if he weathers the early storm, I don't see how Volkanovski loses this fight.
Yeah, solid points. So let's actually make some predictions now.
Okay, all right.
And this may surprise you. And guys, before we finish up this conversation, we just want to thank today's sponsor, Fight Signal. Fight Signal is the tool that the real diehard fight fans are using to break down UFC fights from an analytical perspective. Fight Signal pulls over 7,500 past UFC fights, compares the stylistic differences between the fighters and how the matchup may play out, and it even pulls what the sentiment on social media is, everything from Reddit, X, YouTube, and beyond. The pro version is $19 a month, but if you use our special code Barnhill, you get 50% off for life.
Oh yeah.
Fight Signal has been over 80% correct on their predictions of all fights in 2025. Sign up at fightsignal.com. You'll wonder how you ever watched fights without it.
Thank you, Fight Signal. Now let's get back to the show.
I'm going Diego Lopes by finish.
Are you really?
Diego Lopes technical knockout in the second round, and I'll tell you why. I mean, when you look at Father Time in MMA, it is completely undefeated. I think that Volkanovski's best days are behind him.
Okay.
I do not believe that Diego Lopes's best days are behind him. So that means that Diego Lopes that we're going to see this weekend is going to be the best, most prepared Diego Lopes that we've ever seen.
I agree.
And I don't believe this is going to be the best Volkanovski we've ever seen. I think when you think about, prime Volkanovski, when he defeated Max Holloway 3 times, even the loss to Islam, he looked phenomenal.
Amazing.
The win over Yair Rodriguez was flawless. And I have a hard time believing that that's the fighter that we're going to see show up on Saturday night.
Okay.
So I think we have two ships kind of passing in the night, and they're heading to totally different destinations.
Okay.
I think Diego Lopes is heading towards the top, and Volkanovski is heading towards retirement. Now, I'm not one to say if Volkanovski loses this fight, even though it's 3 in a row, that he has to retire. No. He can have some fun if he wants to. If he wants to retire, he's done. There's nothing left to prove for Volkanovski. But I am of the mindset that his chin is a bit compromised.
Yeah.
Because that was the conversation, right? Is Volk's chin compromised, or were those 2 knockouts a reflection of the fact that he just went up against 2 killers without enough time to rest in between, and he suffered the consequences?
Right.
I am starting to lean more towards the former. I think Volkanovski, I mean, the guy has had, 27, 28 fights, something like that, however many title fights, however many 5-rounders, like that takes a toll on your body. It takes a toll on your chin. And there's only so many times that you can answer that bell until you start to see the effects of that. I think we've already seen the effects of it, and I think they're only going to get worse, not better. Diego Lopes, technical knockout, round 2.
Damn, well, it hurts me to hear that, but I think it's a pretty good prediction.
Yeah.
And I like Diego. I think Diego probably will get to the belt at some point, but I agree with you as well that I don't think this will be the best Volkanovski that we've ever seen, but even the best Volkanovski isn't required to beat Diego Lopes. I think that Volkanovski, as long as his chin isn't as completely gone, he will find a way to get his hand raised in this fight. I just think that when Volkanovski's that kind of guy that seems to run really well off doubt. And I think that the world is doubting Volkanovski. I think that they, maybe they see him as one of those guys that's just going to move himself right out of the division. Think about Leon Edwards. He was the champion, and now you can see the fall is now beginning.
Yeah.
I don't know if I see that happening for Volk. Like I said, Volk has been the best 45er on the planet for years and years and years. And then Ilya, of course, came up, but that was sort of a nice opportunity for him, right? Whenever he moved up and now he was down on his luck, it was just an interesting situation. But I don't think that Volkanovski has to fight better than he's ever fought to beat Diego Lopes. I think Diego Lopes has to fight the best fight he's ever fought and show us some new wrinkles, show us a little bit more out of his game plan, a little bit more of his versatility. If he's able to do that, I can see how Diego wins this fight. And if he wins this fight, 100% it's by a first round or a second round finish. But my mind and my brain and my heart and every bit of me is telling me that Volkanovski is going to be the world champion again. We're going to see one more run for the man down under. He's going to get his belt back, hopefully get to control his division for a little while longer before inevitably somebody comes and steals it from him. But I've got Volk winning, and I do think that what I said about the first round is going to be true. I think he's going to have a sense of urgency to get the fight to the ground. I think he successfully finds top control on Diego Lopes, drains the gas tank, plays real conservative with top pressure, puts his head in Diego's chin, goes body, head, eats up minutes on the clock, more importantly, eats up the gas tank of Diego Lopes. And then rounds 2, 3, and 4 are going to be a little bit easier. He's going to be able to dance around, use every bit of the cage, likely not have to go back to the ground again. And then I see him getting a TKO stoppage after maybe a little bit. Actually, yeah, I'm going to go ground and pound stoppage. I think
in round 5, you're saying?
I'm going I'll go round 4. It's going to be a decision if he doesn't win round 1. But if he wins round 1, like I'm predicting he does, I think he gets it done in round 4.